Not all addicts reach jails or institutions in order to hit their bottom. In his story, originally published in the Little White Book and later included in our second edition, this different addict explains that his disease kept him confined to a life of fear and loneliness. He found serenity in a simple life in Narcotics Anonymous. I was different. My story made different from other you have heard, in that I was never arrested or hospitalized. I did, however, reach the point of utter despair which so many of us have experienced. It is not my track record that shows my addiction, but rather than my feelings and my life. Addiction was my way of life, the only way of life I knew for many years. Thinking back, I must have taken one look at life and decided I didn't want any part of it. I came from a good old-fashioned, upper-middle-class broken home. I can't remember a time when I haven't been strung out. As a small child, I found out I could ease the pain with food, and here my drug addiction began. I became part of the pill mania in the 1950s. Even at this time, I found it hard to take medication as directed. I figured that 2 pills would do twice as much good as 1. I remember hoarding pills, stealing from my mother's prescriptions, having a hard time making the pills last until the next refill. I continued to use them this way throughout my early years. When I was in high school and the drug craze hit, the transition between drugstore dope and street dope was a natural. I had already been using drugs on a daily basis for nearly 10 years. These drugs had virtually stopped working. I was plagued with adolescent feelings of inadequacy and inferiority. The only answer I had was that if I took something, I either was, felt, or acted better. The story of my street using is pretty normal. I used anything and everything available every day. It didn't matter what I took, as long as I got high. Drugs seemed good to me in those years. I was a crusader. I was an observer. I was afraid, and I was alone. Sometimes I felt all-powerful, and sometimes I prayed for the comfort of idiocy. If only I didn't have to drink to think. I remembered feeling different, not quite human, and I couldn't stand it. I stayed in my natural state, loaded. In 1966, I think, I got turned on to heroin. After that, like so many of us, nothing else would do the thing for me. At first, I popped occasionally, and then only used on weekends. But a year later, I had a habit, and 2 years later, I flunked out of college and started working where my connection worked. I used stuff and dealt, and ran for another year and a half before I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I found myself strung out and no longer able to function as a human being. During this last year of my using, I started looking for help. Nothing worked. Nothing helped. Somewhere along the line, I had gotten a telephone number of a man in NA. Against my better judgment and without hope, I made what may well be the most important phone call of my life. No one came to save me. I wasn't instantly cured. The man said that if I had a drug problem, I might benefit from the meetings. He gave me the address of a meeting for that night. It was too far to drive, and besides, I was kicking. He also gave me the address of another meeting a couple of days later and closer to home. I promised him I'd go look. When the night came, I was deathly afraid of getting busted. and afraid of the dope fiends I would find there. I knew I wasn't like the addict you read about in the books or newspapers. Despite these fears, I made my first meeting. I was dressed in a three-piece black suit, black tie, and 84 hours off a two and a half year run. I didn't want you to know what and who I was. I don't think I fooled anybody. I was screaming for help, and everybody knew it. I really don't remember much from that first meeting, but I must have heard something that brought me back. The first feeling I do remember on this program was a gnawing fear that because I'd never been busted or hospitalized for drugs, I might not qualify and might not be accepted. I used twice during my first 2 weeks to run the program and finally gave up. I no longer cared whether or not I qualified. I didn't care if I was accepted. I didn't even care what the people thought of me. I was too tired to care. I don't remember exactly when, but shortly after I gave up, I began to get some hope from that this program might work for me. I started to imitate some of the things the winners were doing. I got caught up in NA. I felt good. It was great to be clean for the first time in years. After I'd been around for about 6 months, the novelty of being clean wore off. I fell off that rosy cloud I had been riding. It got hard. Somehow, I survived that first dose of reality. I think the only things I had gone for me then were the desire to stay clean no matter what, faith that things would work out okay so long as I didn't use, and people who were willing to help when I asked for help. Since then, it's been an uphill fight. I have had to work to stay clean. I've found it necessary to go to many meetings, to work with newcomers, to participate in NA, to get involved. I've had to work the 12 steps as best I could, and I've had to learn to live. Today, my life is much simpler. I have a job I like, I'm comfortable in my marriage, I have real friends, and I'm active in NA. This type of life seems to suit me fine. I used to spend my time looking for the magic, those people, places, and things which would make my life ideal. I no longer have time for magic. I'm too busy learning how to live. It's a long, slow process. Sometimes I think I'm going crazy. Sometimes I think, what's the use? Sometimes I back myself into that corner of self-obsession and think there's no way out. Sometimes I think I can't stand life's problems anymore. But then this program provides an answer, and the bad times pass. Most of the time, life's pretty good, and sometimes life is great. Greater than I can ever remember. I learned to like myself and found friendship. I came to know myself a little bit and found understanding. I found a little faith, and from it, freedom. And I found service, and learned that this provides the fulfillment I need for happiness.